Hi guys, Stephen Simpson here. On this episode of the podcast, I interview Gavin McHale. Gavin is a business coach and a personal development specialist with Craig Ballantyne's organization. Gavin is also a real estate investor and has run multiple businesses while helping other entrepreneurs do some big things in their own right. We talk about his background in getting into business coaching, mindset, goal setting, and a bunch of tips for those who want to make this a great year coming up. And to find out more about what we are doing at Focus Capital and sign up for our newsletter, I encourage everyone to visit focuscapital.ca. And with that, I hope you enjoy the show. So Gavin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yes, very excited to be chatting with a fellow Canadian. This is the stuff that gets me fired up, some real estate investing talk and tying it into the mindset.
There you go. And I think we've both been experiencing some very wintry Canadian weather the past few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're probably a little bit more used to it than I am out in Winnipeg, but we're definitely getting some of that here. So
with Winnipeg is if you can get a good set of long johns and a good jacket, you'll be okay.
Yeah. My in-laws actually, I don't know if I told you this, but my in-laws actually used to live in Winnipeg. So yeah, I visited there a few times, and
nice.
Unfortunately, they were both in the winter, the both times I visited. So there you go.
It's too bad.
Yeah. So welcome again. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. You know, you're someone I've worked with in the past. You're someone I respect a lot. And, I think it's probably appropriate for us to talk now. It's a new year. It's the start of 2024. There's lots going on. The market's changing, both for business, both for real estate. We've got a sort of a fresh start here, but there's lots of things that give people, hope, but also a little bit of anxiety with what's happened in the past few years with the pandemic and trying to come out of that. But I'm optimistic for this year. So I think it's appropriate that we're talking, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. Yeah. So where I thought we'd start is just talking a little bit more about how you got into the personal development and obviously into coaching after that. And I know you're an athlete, and you came up through the competitive sports ranks in hockey, and I'd really like to kind of understand a little bit more about that backstory and what led you to get into personal development, because there's a community of us out there who are into personal development. We're looking to kind of move the needle a little bit. We're looking to kind of get a little bit of an edge and just kind of move forward and using tools and techniques out there to, like I said, to get better and to become the best versions of ourselves, really, at the end of the day. So really would be interested to hear about your backstory and how you kind of got into the personal development space.
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing starts with kind of where I was at the opposite end of the spectrum, totally unaware, totally unconscious, teenage kid who was basically one step away from being able to play pro hockey. I was playing in the Western Hockey League. I was talking to NHL teams. And I like to say I orchestrated a complete meltdown over the course of one hockey season that really culminated on New Year's Eve in a game. I was playing for the Seattle Thunderbirds against the Portland Winterhawks and getting my face punched in. I was a goalie, and I got in a fight, got my face punched in. Not a place where you want to be. And unfortunately, that didn't even set me straight. I needed a lot of other moments to end up setting me straight. But I think that is a good kind of leader into this story, because a lot of people that see personal development coaches and mindset coaches and things like that, they go, well, that's not me. They just are good at that. And it's like, if I can shift my stories and my mindset from the place where I was basically, melting down on the world's biggest stage, the biggest sporting stage, if I can shift that and come to a place where now I get to go on podcasts like this and talk about mindset and talk about personal development, then anyone can change their story and anyone can make a shift. And so, I got to kind of continue the story from there. I went to university when hockey didn't work out, and did the next thing that I was really good at, which is be good at school. And I was really good at kind of like talking to people and being in that kind of locker room environment. So I went into personal training. I got my degree in kinesiology, went into personal training, and really learned the ins and outs of what coaching really was, right? When you're working with real life people, not athletes, real life people with real lives and families and all the stuff going on in their heads. And, through that, I learned a lot of things. And I think I got to a point where I was like, I don't think I can teach another person to squat or deadlift. I think there's a bigger picture here of, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I knew that there was a bigger picture that I wanted to help people with their mindset and help people develop. And in my own journey of trying to develop my business, I was learning all these things and realizing, this is really important. Luckily, just before COVID hit, I left the personal training world and shifted my business to working with other fitness business owners, helping them grow their business like I had been able to. And that's when I really, leaned into the mindset stuff, because that's what I needed, in trying to grow my personal training business. The same patterns that came up in hockey were coming up, where I was, I couldn't deal with failure. So when it happened in hockey, I blamed everybody else. And when I noticed that it could be happening in business and in life, I stayed away from it and blamed everybody else and said, oh, it's this, and this. It's not me. And business coaching and building my own business forced me to look in the mirror and say, you're the only one who can change this. And you're the only one, you're the problem and you're the solution. Right. And this is what I realized with a lot of people. If you're feeling stuck in your business, if you're feeling stuck, yes, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that aren't ideal for making a lot of money. But the first place you need to look is in the mirror. And then even like you need to look inward into what are the stories that are not serving you. Because when I started to dig into these and when I started to shift my stories and what was happening in my head, everything, all the tools and tactics and strategies that I had learned started working all of a sudden. I was like, oh, it was never about, of course we need to know if we're investing, we need to know how to invest and how to not make a fool of ourselves and things like that. But it was never about that. It was really about what's going on between the ears. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about and to coach people on now, because everybody's got their stories and everybody's got their stuff that's not serving them. And so I love working with folks like you and people who are just like me with that mentality of wanting to win, but not knowing where to go next.
Right. I think back to some of the, we'll call them leaders in the personal development space, like Tony Robbins. And he talks about, people either make a change from inspiration or desperation, right? They have these kind of like moments where they're just backs up against the wall or they hit rock bottom or something, and they're so frustrated and they got to make a change, and that's a desperation. Yep. Or it's inspiration. They see somebody make a speech, or they see somebody have success, or they look to one of their mentors and they're inspired by that. And so it sounds like in your situation, it was a bit of desperation there that you wanted to have, and frustration that you wanted to make that change, and that kind of pushed you into this.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I love that quote, but I truly do believe that for most people, we're so bloody stubborn, right?
Yeah.
That we almost need the desperation. And actually, Alex Hormozy and a lot of people these days will talk about how some of those like not so good feelings are actually really good to spark action, because you're kind of forced to take action, right? Inspiration is great, but I've left a lot of keynote speeches where I'm like, that was so inspiring, and then I didn't really do anything with it.
Right.
Whereas if we have that desperation, it's like that's what makes you spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, and that's what makes you take the action, to the scary action that hurts sometimes, to make a change. So I think it's a matter of actually figuring out, okay, if desperation was a start, when do I flip the switch over to inspiration and into my purpose and something bigger? Because desperation, that type of driver will only take us so far. But I feel like we all have a little bit of that. And it's like, you could also create desperation, right? I was forced into desperation, but something that Craig's talked about recently, our a mutual friend of ours, Craig Ballantyne, has talked about, who are you comparing yourself to, right? If I'm comparing myself to my buddies from high school who are not doing a whole lot of anything, I don't have any desperation. But if I'm comparing myself to our clients in Early to Rise who are making millions and just literally changing the world, I'm like, man, I gotta get moving here. Right. And
Yeah.
that creates that desperation and inspiration, which I think is a great way to kickstart your journey.
Yeah, for sure. And the desperate pain is a much better motivator in the end, right? Like that thing again, if
Yep.
you're desperate and you're frustrated and you're just sick and tired, I mean, you're experiencing a lot of pain, you will get moving just out of necessity. You have to. So
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to ask you, so building on that, I wanted to ask you about building self-confidence. And I think you touched upon that in what you were just saying. But, in order to maybe not make that initial change, but to keep that change going and to keep progress, moving forward, we really need to build our self-confidence and keep that high so that we can, I guess use those tools of inspiration and desperation but keep it moving forward so it's a little bit more sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you about that. What's that sort of link that you see between, that self-confidence that someone has and maybe how do you build that to kind of keep that forward momentum going?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories to tell people is when I was playing hockey, how coaches would call me in, right? When I was playing junior hockey, I was struggling, having tough games or whatever. We'd lost a few games and they'd call me in and they'd go, Gav, and this is 2005, right?
Right.
So the whole mindset thing wasn't really a thing yet, right? But they'd call me and they go, Gav, you got to play with more confidence. Agreed. Yep. And then they're like, okay, go be confident. I'm like, how? Like what?
How?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I buy that? Can I where do I get this confidence?
Is
Right.
that, did I get to the 7-Eleven and get some
Yeah.
confidence? Like, where do I get that from?
Yeah. Like any
Yeah.
tips? And they're just like, oh, just be confident. Right. And
Yeah.
so I've spent a lot of time and energy thinking about how do we actually build this thing
Yeah.
that is really an elusive concept for a lot of people. And especially when you lose it. Right. And I know a lot of people who are investors or who are trying to build a business, it's been tough sledding.
Yep.
So have you maybe lost your confidence in yourself, right? It's one thing to be confident when everything's going well and we're just crushing and everything's landing, right? All our sales pitches are landing. Every deal is closing. Oh yeah, I'm
Well,
super confident.
Well, and we saw it, especially in the real estate space,
Right.
between 2021 and 2022, like you could do no wrong. I mean, so investors got a lot, very
Yeah.
full of themselves
You
and
couldn't
that
lose.
confidence was, yeah, you couldn't, right? So
If
that
you
was
had a
kind of like
heartbeat,
this fluffy self-confidence, but it wasn't really that they were doing anything wrong or doing anything right. So,
right.
yeah,
And, if you had a heartbeat and a credit score, you were
yeah,
good. And
exactly.
now is when we need to go, okay, well, how do I build confidence? And I believe that confidence comes from evidence. And
Yeah.
so what does that mean? Evidence is literally just finding proof that you are who you say you are, right? Quite simply is actively looking for proof that you are who you say you are. It's not from meditating. It's not from as Alex Hormozy says, screaming affirmations in the mirror. No, it's from finding proof. So what we need to do, I say to a lot of people too, like you already have the evidence. It's already there. You're just not looking for it. And so one of the biggest concepts that I talk about a lot is the part of your brain called the reticular activating system. Anybody who maybe doesn't know exactly what this means, maybe's heard of it or haven't heard of it. This is the thing when you're looking for a new car, you see that car everywhere on the road.
Yeah.
Or when you're looking at buying an investment property, you see for sale signs everywhere. It's the part of your brain that tells your conscious brain what to focus on
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much going on, right? So the thing with the reticular activating system, though, is it's more of a soldier So it doesn't actually like create its own ideas. It just like goes, oh, okay, well, that's what you want me to do. I'll do it. So if you have, it will confirm the beliefs that you already have of yourself. Right. So if you feel you're not confident, if you feel you're no good at investing, or if you feel you're not successful, or money's hard to make, or any of these beliefs that you have running through your head about yourself and how you fit into the world, your reticular activating system will go, okay, great. Well, I'm going to look for evidence of those things so that we can reinforce this belief. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that there's already evidence that we can be confident. We just probably haven't been looking for it. Right.
Right.
So we need to make that shift and look for evidence that we are who we say we are, that we are moving in the right direction, that we are, that these beliefs that are serving us are true. And how we do that is by taking intentional and inspired action, and by actively looking for those wins. One of the first things I have a lot of my clients do if they're not feeling very confident is what I call a brag book. Write down one place where you won today, where you did well today. A lot of them have a lot harder time than you think. Just
Yeah.
writing one thing, right? Or one thing that aligns with your beliefs that are serving you, right? One positive thing. Because we're so quick to look for the negatives and look for the quote unquote places we can improve, that we forget to look for the places where we're already doing well. And if we can start to build up that stack of proof and evidence, that's when we can start to build confidence in ourselves that, hey, I can do this. I am doing this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 So it's because it's very factual. Like you're presenting
Right.
yourself evidence. And I
Yeah.
find with a lot of personal development, it's really just getting back to basics, right? Like, I mean, it's
Yep.
taking, as you said, what's already there and saying, yeah, look at that thing I did last week or last year or last month or whatever it was, and saying, that was pretty important. That was a pretty great thing that I did. And no matter how small it is, but building upon those successes. So yeah, I like that concept of the brag book. And, I did that exercise a couple years ago, actually.
Yeah.
And it was like write down 25 or 50 things, whatever it was. And I go back to that from time to time. And it's like, yeah, it's nice to be able to do it because you forget some of the stuff you've done, and some of the
Totally.
wins and successes. So I think that's a great idea. So yeah, so evidence for self-confidence, talking about inspiration, desperation, and pushing yourself forward. Getting back to sort of the sports or the athletic side. You had mentioned something to me before about this athlete or high performer mindset, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you a bit about that and just sort of, what that concept is, why or why not it might be serving you, or maybe, how people should sort of think about that and sort of take that forward.
Yeah, I think this is really well illustrated with a story. A friend of mine was in town for Christmas. This was even last year, so I've had a lot of time to think on it now. And he's a former high level basketball player. He's now CEO of a startup in Toronto.
Okay.
And he was talking about, because he knows what I do, we're very close friends, and he was talking about how he had started counseling because he was just feeling a lot of anxiety and stress with his job. I mean, he's got very like fast paced company,
Yeah.
tech medical space. It's moving
Startup.
fast.
Yeah.
Startup, it's like constantly no money, right? And then living in downtown Toronto, which is just anxiety city in itself. So he had said he had started counseling, and I said, well, what's the biggest takeaway that you've taken from counseling? And he'd maybe gone 3 or 4 times, and he said, my athlete mentality is killing me. And I was like, oh yes, here we go. And so we had a really good chat about it, and we dug in on this athlete, or I even call it high performer mentality, because there's a lot of people who maybe aren't athletes anymore, or maybe even haven't been athletes, but they're these high performers who, for lack of a better way of explaining it, want to win. Right?
Yeah.
We want to win at whatever we do. I know you have this. I have this. A lot of the people I talk to have this. That's why we invest in these courses and coaching and all this stuff. Why we listen to these podcasts, because we want to win. And that's great. But if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek, he wrote a book, I think it was actually called The Infinite Game. And he
Yep.
talks about the difference between finite games and infinite games. And finite games are baseball, basketball, hockey, chess. These are games where there is a clear opponent. The game is played with rules, specific rules, and there's a specific endpoint, and it's played to be finished, right? The game of basketball is played to be finished. There is a winner and a loser, right? That's a finite game. Now, what we often do, because our brains need something to measure, especially if we're brought up in this high develop or high performing world, and even if you're not an athlete, our school system brings this out in us, right? Mm-hmm. What's your grade? How high did you get on your grade? It's something to measure. It's this like external validation that someone else has said based on this set of rules that I'm good enough, right? That's what sports is, and that's what school is. And it's great, and it teaches us tons of lessons until we try and apply the same rules to what Simon Sinek calls an infinite game. So career, business, life, marriage, fitness, all the big things, those are infinite games. And what he means is there's no set opponents. There's really no set rules. And the game is played to continue playing, right? You win at marriage by staying married. You win at fitness by staying alive and staying fit, right? You win at business by staying in business and constantly just growing. But these are things that are hard to, like, there's no scoreboard, right? So we come out of our athlete world where all that matters is the scoreboard and winning and stats. And we come into real life where there's no scoreboard, right? We have to find other ways to measure success. And this comes back to the confidence thing, which is if you're looking for evidence and wins, how can we find ways to measure success, right? I think that's so important. And so what my friend needed to deal with, and what I've helped a lot of people with since learning this and kind of like applying it to my own life and my coaching, is we need to clearly define success for what we want, like values and vision, right? And then we need to look for tangible markers that tell us we're on the right path. That's how we can measure that success and how we can use that. But if we're trying to win, right, and we're trying to just like get external validation for everything, well, then you're constantly just going to be chasing what I fell into in my business life, which is more. And more never becomes anything other than more. The goalposts just keep moving, right? Yeah. I need more investment properties. I need to make more money. I need that. And you just like keep chasing this for literally no reason other than external validation and satisfying your ego. And that's what leads to hospitalizations and divorces and all that stuff, even though you have all this money and you have all this quote unquote success, right? So it can be a real slippery slope.
So as you were saying that, the thing that was sticking out in my mind was just getting back to talking about goals, because, goals in the context of personal development go kind of hand in hand. But one of the things that, I was reading about a few years back was about process goals versus product goals. So product goals in your example of an infinite game obviously aren't going to work, right? It's like, product goal is I'm going to make $1 million, or I'm going to score 10 goals, or I'm going to, it's a finite thing.
I'm going to lose 50 pounds, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can go both ways, right? But those things, especially when you're dealing with other people, when it's a relationship involved, or when you're dealing with the free market, it's hard to kind of pin those things down sometimes. Like if you're playing a hockey game or a soccer game or something, and you've got 60 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever, at the end of that, it's a finite thing. But when you're going out into the free market or having, a relationship, whether it's your spouse or, whether it's a business partnership or something, these are things that are just going to grow and evolve, right? Yeah. And so getting back to the concept of building confidence, one of the things I was reading about was, and I try to practice, is focusing more on the process goals, right? So what did I do today to contribute to moving this particular thing forward, versus worrying about, I haven't got 1,000 clients yet, or I haven't, made that $1 million or whatever. It's,
Yeah.
did I make 20 calls today? Did I, take my wife on a date, once or twice this
Yes.
week? Did I spend, an hour with my kids, after dinner tonight or something? You know what I mean? So it is a way to kind of help you to get a bit of that finite quality in the process versus,
Totally.
leaving it completely. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's, as you were saying it, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. The kind of overarching question there or theme is, how do we set goals?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. If you're talking about this, how do we set goals and not just float through life, this infinite game? Right.
Right.
Well, I like one of the things we've figured out with Craig's business and with our clients is we like to use those outcome goals, or as you called them, product goals. What I feel those do, let's say I want to make $1 million, okay, this year. Okay. That's an outcome goal. Now, even if I do everything right, I can make 999,000 and not hit that goal.
Right.
But I would probably be okay because I did everything right. And so what we do is we use the outcome goal of the $1 million that's not within our control to set the intensity of the action steps, which is the process goals. So if you want to make $1 million this year, you're going to have some pretty good process goals. Like, you're going to have to be pretty intense action steps. But if you want to make 100 million this year, it's going to be very different.
Yeah.
And there's this great quote where your goals are not unique, right? And the difference between the people who hit their goals and the people who don't is not the goals they set, right? Because so many people set the goal to make $1 million next year and don't do it. The difference is in the actions that they take.
Right.
And so what we need to do is we set the goal to set the intensity of the action steps, and then we actually measure our success by whether or not we hit those action steps. And if we set the right action steps, preferably action steps that would make it unreasonable to fail, and we hit those, then we'll succeed by default because we're just doing the right things, which is really what matters. As you just said, that's
Yeah.
what actually matters, is doing the right things
Yeah.
day in, day out.
And another thing that just sort of popped in my mind is, if we're doing those right things, then we're actually being or living the thing that we want to achieve, right?
Yes.
So,
And regardless of if we, all timelines are arbitrary, all goals are arbitrary, regardless of if we hit it or not, we're doing the right things.
yeah. Yeah. So if you're trying to start a new business and, you have this big goal of making $1 million with your brand new business, but instead of just focusing on that, focusing on doing the things and the processes that a successful entrepreneur would do day in and day out, then you are living that life, right? And you will eventually get to those goals. But yeah, it's in the doing and in the being day in and day out.
Yeah, and to bring it kind of full circle back to someone like Tony Robbins, who would say, act as if.
Yep.
Right? Act as if you are that $1 million business owner. And if you act as if for long enough, you will receive the thing because you're taking the actions.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it was Tony Robbins, but the quote I'm thinking of is be, do, and have, right?
That's James Clear.
Be that.
Yeah.
Is it James Clear? Yeah.
From Atomic Habits. Yeah. If you
Yeah.
become the person, you will do the things, and then you will have the results.
Yeah.
Which is just a wonderful way of looking at it. And that's I think where we kind of went off track with the high performance and athletes mentality, right? We went off track in that it's about the outcome, because in sports it was, and in school it was. But like, when you think back to, like, say, school, or even to sports, I remember playing hockey, and we'd lose a game and our coach would be like, yeah, we lost, but we played a really great game. Yeah. Or we won, but we played like crap and we beat a lesser team. And they're like, yeah, I'm still not happy with that win, right? That's process-based thinking. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Okay. And so as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to ask you sort of a final question about, advice for people on, maybe again, so we're starting a new year. People are looking to make changes. People are looking to sort of make these habits stick. And, maybe they've got some limiting beliefs in themselves. What advice could you sort of give for people who are maybe just looking to take that next step and just sort of make a change in their life? And, maybe they've been frustrated with some of the things they've been doing in the past little while. And what are some simple things that they could sort of take forward to make this new year work?
Yeah, I'll give like a brief rundown of how to kind of figure out what are the stories that aren't serving you, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of us, we know something's not serving us, but it's really hard to find because it's in our subconscious mind, right?
Yeah.
And I won't go too deep into that, but what I've found is the best way to figure out what your limiting beliefs are or your stories are is think about your like big scary goals that you have, or the things that like you want to accomplish in your life but you haven't yet. And then think about your yeah but, like your excuses. Like what's your yeah but? Yeah, I get it, $1 million a year, but that's your limiting belief, right? But I'm not good enough yet. Or but I don't have any money to invest, right? Well, those are stories that you're telling yourself, right? I'm not good enough yet. Well, how do you define good enough, and good enough for what? And do you need to be good enough to succeed to do that thing? Or do you just have to do the things and then you will become good enough,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then what this does is it allows us. So once you find that, I call it excuse. It's kind of a harsh word for it, but really it's just like, what's the story you're telling yourself that's not serving you? And then what we can do is, most of us that are high performers would immediately get judgmental of ourselves, right? Oh, I can't believe it, because
That never
now we're
happens. What are you
angry at
talking
ourselves.
about?
Yeah, right. But judgment and curiosity live next door to each other. And you see the sign behind me that says, be curious, not judgmental. So can you turn your judgment of yourself into curiosity? And as I said earlier, like kind of start asking those questions of like, well, what do I mean I'm not good enough? Like, what does good enough mean? And da da da. And then we start kind of
Right.
like pulling on that thread. And then we can start uncovering and becoming way more aware of what these stories are. And when we realize these stories and they become, front and center in our face, we can go, well, that's kind of dumb that I think
Yeah.
that way. And there's a whole bunch of there's like, specific steps we could take. But I think the most important thing here is to bring that to the forefront and recognize that you can choose to tell a different story. And if you choose to tell a different story and look for evidence of that new story, everything could change.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Awesome. No, that's really good advice. So as we wrap up, Gavin, I wanted to just ask you, like, where can people find out more about you, the work you do, and if there's any sort of things you want to highlight that people can
Yeah,
find out about.
I would want to leave people with two things. So if you want to like see regular content, at Gavin McHale 1 on Instagram, we're really putting an effort in on creating lots of content for people in terms of exactly what we've talked about. But I want to leave you, and I'll send you the link, Stephen, for me and Craig created a money mindset like visualization on YouTube. It's totally free. It's 9.5 minutes long, so it doesn't even take 10 minutes of your day. And you can even listen to this while you're driving or while you're out for a walk or things like that. And it's all about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance. The people who have listened to it have had ridiculous results and have just really enjoyed listening to it every day. And it's something, you can listen to morning, night, whenever you want. Craig listens to it like 5 times a day. And it just resets the way you think about money and the way you think about abundance in general. So maybe you can drop that in the show notes.
Yep.
Even if you want to right now, dailymoneyattraction.com will redirect you to the YouTube video, and it's totally free.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. We'll put that link in the show notes, and so
Great.
people can access it from there. So,
Awesome.
Gavin, thanks again for being on the show. I think this was a great conversation, a good way to start the year, as I said. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks
Stephen. It's been fun.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Gavin. So, hope you got some value out of this podcast episode. I invite you to like and subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, leave a comment, let us know what you think. And for any other information about us, what we're doing, and the types of investments we're into, please visit focuscapital.ca, and on there you can find a ton of information, additional podcasts, and a lot of free resources. So that's it for this podcast episode. Bye for now.